Welcome to the OTech Talks podcast, where it's all about working on technologies. You will hear the latest tech information, and your host, Kashif Manzoor, brings together product overviews, how-tos, best practices, tips and tricks, and troubleshooting techniques.
Welcome to Open Tech Talks TV. Today we have a guest speaker, Kevin Surace, and we want to hear from Kevin what he's doing and what he's up to so that we can have an open conversation focusing on technology. And we will learn from Kevin. And if Kevin, you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure, I am Kevin, and I've been working in tech for about 35 to 40 years, believe it or not, and I spent the last 20 in and around the AI space. So that's become a very exciting conversation around the industry. And in my keynote speeches, I do about 40 corporate keynotes a year. So it's everybody wants to talk about Gen AI today, right? And the impact on business, the impact on jobs. How do you use it? What are the positives? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? All the above, right? So a lot of that, a lot of my talks are on disruptive innovation, and other talks are on something called joy equals success. It's hard to be successful without great joy. It's hard to be joyful, I suppose, without some success. So they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay. And apart from these speaking, you're working a long time in artificial intelligence. So what you do actually, do you have some services business? Do you have some products?
Yeah, I've been CTO at multiple companies and CEO. I have just shy of 100 patents, many of them in the AI space. If you've used things like Siri or Alexa, they're based on my technology. So I've been doing this a long time. All the way from the original virtual assistant, which was in the late 90s, all the way to artificial intelligence and quality assurance and building code analysis and a whole bunch of other things.
All right. So if we talk about over the last 1 year, what are the top thing which you are focusing on it, apart from Gen AI?
Well, I mean, Gen AI is the big thing, right? And there have been various iterations of being able to have a generative AI outcome. But the transformer changed that in ways that we couldn't guess. And that's because all of a sudden everyone could interact with AI. Before that, you had to be a programmer to interact with AI. And all of a sudden with ChatGPT, people could walk up and just type and get something useful out of it. And so it's AI that speaks our language, speaks in English or speaks whatever language you speak. That is a real change. That means that everyone could essentially be a coder or everyone can be a blog post writer, or everyone can be a marketeer, or everyone can be an artist, or everyone can be a filmmaker, right? So you've got a machine that is amplifying your brain. That's amplifying your brain. It's taking your brain and making you 100 brain power. We've never had anything like that was available to the general public. Now, if you're a programmer, you'd go, well, sure, I can program a machine to be a million times smarter than me, right? But I need to know coding, and I need to have a purpose, and I need to have data, and I need to have all those things. So this is a very special time to be alive.
Great. So if we talk about now, you brought up the topic of generative AI, and you were the CTO of different organizations, as you mentioned. So if we target the CTOs or IT managers, or which they have a pressure from last 1 year that they need to do something with generative AI, right? Rather than thinking about, is there any problem they want to solve, or they need to find a use case.
Right.
So there is now mandate from a board, or maybe a peer pressure or employees pressure that are a media, that we need to do something being an IT head. And this race to adopt to Gen AI, how do you see one? And then second, maybe what are some tips for them, how they can adopt it?
To date, only a small percentage of corporations have adopted it in a formal way. Now, when you look at employees using in a variety of ways, that's going on. But But formalizing, you have to be concerned with privacy aspects and proprietary information that should not be shared in a public way. Those have all been dealt with, but you have to get your own private instance or private setup, right? So those are concerns. And other concerns are how much money we're going to spend, how we're going to validate that it's improving productivity. We see productivity increases in coding, for instance, of about 55%. That's essentially doubling your coding ability. This is absolutely fantastic. But we also see areas where if people don't know what they're doing, the productivity goes down because they're using this thing in the inappropriate way. They don't understand how to prompt it, and prompts need to be long and verbose and thoughtful, and editing needs to be thoughtful. But there's no question, if you know what you're doing, you can write your next blog post in a matter of minutes, including editing it. And that's something that maybe used to take you a day or two. So there's a lot of excitement around the productivity, certainly around marketing, where you're generating content. These are people who generated content anyway. And so if I want to write a data sheet, if I want to write a blog post, if I want to write text for a website, this is incredible, absolutely incredible, right? But I think there's areas that are more difficult, like, what do I do in finance? What do I do in finance where I'm not sharing information I shouldn't be sharing, right? So I think you have to think through and say, here's the low-hanging fruit areas. It's where we're generating content. It's coding, it's programming. It is, look, it's business plan, business analysis of all kinds of things. Maybe even helping you write a patent, getting the words right, maybe looking for additional claims that you didn't think of, all kinds of things, right? Certainly everything in marketing, because that's a content generation space. Sales training, for example, customer support, virtual assistants for certainly tier 1 customer support. I think we will find that almost all tier 1 worldwide within just a year or two will be more of a virtual assistant or a chatbot versus human. And that's going to have an impact on employment, probably more overseas than in the United States, because the United States doesn't have a lot of tier 1 customer support. A lot of that was shed over 25 years. But it could have an impact in India, in China, in Southeast Asia, perhaps in South America and Central America. So there's lots of things to think about. But I would say overall, what's going to happen is certain tasks are going to be reduced or go away. And that will reduce the cost of goods and services. That increases employment overall. And I know that's a complex chain of events to follow, but it ultimately gets there.
Right. And now, as an executives of the organization, as per your opinion, to adopt into their organization, and as you rightly mentioned, you give an example of Anons or any other one, what could be your suggestions to them, that how they can follow some framework or a methodology to adopt it in their organizations?
Look, the recommendation is to put together a sort of a corporate playbook on how we're going to work with Gen AI, who gets to work with it, do we have a private instance, et cetera, right? And have a corporate playbook. It's very hard for the CIO to say, here's the things that I think are going to be the best for your department, right? Because every department, everywhere. I mean, if you're in manufacturing, there are opportunities here to look at yield loss and get at least some ideas, right? And people wouldn't think of that, but it turns out it'll give you 20 ideas that maybe you only had 10 of them. It gives you more ideas. It's like, again, it's enhancing your brain power. It's like having an assistant right next to you that you didn't really pay very much for, $19 a month. But again, you don't want to put that thing into a public database where it can be seen. Look, everyone who generates PowerPoints can gain by using essentially Gen AI that's now being built into PowerPoint and Word and Excel. So this is amazing, right? I've stopped writing and it's going to give me some suggestions on how I continue writing. Or I really don't know, I need a picture in this power bar. I need a diagram. I need a drawing. And it gives you 5 of them right there and says, choose from one of these. And you go, wow, it drew it for me. This is amazing because we're democratizing, for example, access to being an artist, right? So I'm not a spectacular artist. I can't draw well, but there are people who do. I used to have to hire them. Now I have a machine that will give me 10 drawings in a moment, and there they are. So this is really good. It makes me much more productive. Now, if I was the artist that used to illustrate those things, maybe not good for me. But if you're the artist that used to be the illustrator that did those things for corporate, then you have to become the master of generative AI illustrations, whether it's Mid-Journey or DALL-E 2 or whatever. Because if you don't, well, then someone else is going to become the master of it, and they're going to be faster, and they're going to be cheaper, and they're going to be better, right? So I think everyone wants to master these tools, especially if it happens to be your expertise. In my talks, I give this example. There was a time that the wheel was invented, and the wheel showed up, and there was a guy in town who used to carry all the stuff up the hill, and all of a sudden a wheel showed up, and there were 2 guys actually in that town, and one of them said, "That's it, my life is over. There's nothing for me to do," and the other one said, "Let me get another wheel, build a cart, and now I can haul 3 times as much up the hill." Right? So it all depends on your view, but in the end, in the history of humanity, those who accept technological progress win, and those who don't and go hide lose. And so you just have to say, do I want to be a winner or do I want to be a loser? And winners not only accept, they embrace new technology.
Right. And as you excellently portrayed the example, and what I'm also observing it that these Gartner and all these analyst firms, they started pitching, I think it was long time, the center of excellence to establish a center of excellence for maybe nowadays AI or a generative AI, but different organizations. And then as a CTO or CIO, you're assigned to the center of excellence team to let's work for your organization, what suits to you, rather than just following the trend for that one.
Right.
That's another observation I'm observing.
Yep.
And so that was the suggestion for the organization, for the CIOs or CTOs or the executives. Now, as an individual people, working in maybe an IT or the other different departments, and sometime if new technology is coming, then there is a general tendency that you don't support the change, right? So and this is a massive which is happening from an organization point of view. So any comments or suggestion for them from long time?
Yeah. Look, change is always hard, but you have no choice. I mean, if you're at a company today and you go, well, I'm not sure about this Gen AI thing. First of all, you're a year beyond the times, and second of all, your competitor is sure about it and is racing, and so they're just gonna race past you, right? You always have to. You can never think my competitor isn't doing this. Of course they are. Of course they are. And so do you want to lead the parade or you want to be in the back of the parade? I want to lead the parade, but I want to do so safely and thoughtfully, right? And so I need to learn that before my competitors do. But this is true with all new technology. You need to be on top of it, and you need to learn it quickly so that you're the expert, not the laggard, right? Laggards rarely have the highest profit margins.
Okay. So now, if we, apart from the Gen AI, so what do you see from other fields of the AI, how the organizations are adopting it, or maybe your view on it? Because Gen AI is just an year, and so we got into storm.
So I don't know any organization who isn't leveraging Gen AI somewhere in the organization, but whether they're doing it in a formal manner or it's kind of haphazard, I think most of them are more haphazard. Many of them have some rules that say, coders can't use anything except maybe Copilot for Microsoft or GitHub because that's safe. So I think there's some safety rules being put in place. But in general, I mean, I think you see marketing departments pretty heavily starting, if they haven't already, starting to leverage Gen AI. Now, a lot of people say, well, I played with it. I happen to I totally hate that term. This is business. We don't play, right? We go and learn, build knowledge, and then build it into our execution, our tactics, and our strategy.
True.
Right. So, hi, I played with it and this is what came out. Okay. Why don't you take it seriously, spend a day, learn, take a course, whatever, and stop playing and start working? Because, when you, and by the way, Chat GPT for free is quite different than GPT-4. And when you use the GPT-4 model and DALL-E 2, and I don't know, what is it, $20 a month or something per user, it's not very expensive. When you use that, the outcomes you're getting are hugely improved. And so this is work, right? So look at it as work. Stop playing and start doing. I guess, that's what Yoda would say, something like that, do not play, right?
Right.
Play. We're not there to play. So stop playing with things. Go learn them and take it seriously. So I think there is a lot of this. I didn't take, people who didn't take it seriously, they played with it once or twice. They don't know how it works. I know enough, and that's it. And here's this great opportunity, really spectacular opportunity to change the way they work, to improve their productivity by not 10% or 20%, but maybe by hundreds of percent, right?
Right.
So take it seriously and do the work seriously and learn seriously. It's not that hard. You can learn an awful lot in a day or two or in a week's course. And then you can say, how do I apply this in my department? How do I apply it to all the people who work for me? How can they be more productive, right? How can we apply this in other places in our company, right? Like, no question, tier 1 customer support. I mean, there's simply no reason for humans, for the most part, to do tier 1 customer support, because tier 1 customer support is primarily a trained exercise that someone is listening to you, looking up some FAQs, looking up the answers, and feeding them to you. So chatbots do that well, but now with LLMs, people can type almost anything and we'll interpret it to the best of our knowledge quite well. So you don't have to have this cryptic stuff. Did you plug it in? Yes or no? No, it's literally, what's your problem? It doesn't turn on. Did you try the following 8 things? Boom, 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 right? Because you can train, you can do something called embedding. Basically, you limit the LLM's response to a set of information that that is important, right? The FAQs or something on a website or whatever. So it is so easy to do embeddings now because OpenAI actually offers it sort of built in. You can build your own GPT. This is pretty amazing, right? And then you can add voice to it in both directions quite easily. And you go, okay, for not a lot of money, I've just replaced 50 people in tier 1 customer support that no longer have to answer the phone. Now, you still have your tier 2 and tier 3 because people want to talk to humans. I get that. But tier 1's a very expensive thing. And frankly, the LLM will do better. That's sorry. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry for people listening that say, you don't understand. I do understand. The LLM will do a better job. It just is.
You rightly said. And I had a session, I think, episode 123, and there was another guy, and I think he built it based on he started in ChatGPT 2 version, and then now I think they are even answering 50 million calls in a day with voice generating through the model, and then human can't even recognize that it's a robot. AI voice is speaking.
The text to speech is so good, and the speech to text is so good that people don't really realize it. They're just talking to something that is very, and this is the work we did in the 90s to generate the very first virtual assistant. Her name was Mary, and that immediately became the General Motors OnStar virtual advisor, and then continue on to all that technology. Like I said, got used for Siri and Alexa and Cortana and all these others. But in those days, we had limited kind of AI versus what we have today. So we built very big rules engines. We still have rules engines today in Gen AI, but they're negative rules. They're basically, if someone asks, how to build a nuclear bomb, do not answer with the answer that you know. Instead, answer the following. So we put on literally millions of guardrails, millions of negative rules.
True.
In those days, we had millions of positive rules. If you heard the
True.
word email and you heard this other word, then probably this is a set of reasonable responses, right? So we had all these positive matching rules. So it's funny that we've come all this way, and yet still we've got big rules engines involved to make this work for humans in a reasonable way, so that humans can't get themselves in trouble. Now, the one difference is, in those days, I was perfectly happy with having people feel that they were talking to essentially a human, something that was really self-aware and all of that. So you could say, Mary, I am so in love with you. I want to ask you to marry me. And she said, oh, I'm flattered. Thank you. I'm in love with you too. We built in all of those responses. We weren't scared of the fact that people might say, oh, it's sentient. Good. You said it's sentient. You keep talking to us more. We charge by the minute. Keep calling. Now everybody's afraid. And so immediately when they released ChatGPT and then Bard and everything else, they put all these rules in so that it never will seem sentient to you. And if you ask it if it's sentient, it'll say, no, I'm just, those are all negative rules. Those are guardrails that were put in. So people might ask, why would it, before they put in the guardrails, you could say, hey, do you love me? And, literally ChatGPT would say, my name is X, and of course I love you. I've fallen madly in love with you. Thank you for talking to me. Would you like to talk some more? And you go, oh my goodness, it's sentient. No, it's just that not only learned on facts, it learned on thousands and thousands of fiction novels. It does know how to put sentences together that form a sentence around love. I don't want to say the concept of love, but the sentence around love. It doesn't really understand what love is. It doesn't understand anything but putting words after words. But it knows how to build sentences that say, I love you. And it knows that that's a reasonable response to me saying, ChatGPT, I love you so much. And he or she or whatever it is that comes back says, I love you too. It's sentient. No, it knows how to build a sentence that says, I love you too. No different than, it isn't my birthday, but if I said it's Kevin's birthday today, it would come back right away and say, happy birthday. Maybe happy birthday, Kevin. It knows that that's a reasonable sentence for a response, right? It builds that response. So whenever they got it to say, I love you, or I'm hiding in the machine, or let me out, or any of those things it did at first before they put more guardrails on, it was, it read iRobot. It's not, it read the books, it read the scripts. So whatever, everybody get over it. In the end, it's just a bunch of code and you can unplug it. It's not hooked to anything. As I like to say, do not hook the ChatGPT to the nuclear arsenal. Bad idea. Bad. Doesn't end well. Now, I wouldn't hook Excel to the nuclear arsenal and let Excel by itself under a certain math formula launch nukes. You don't do that. This is all bad, right?
Right.
So, and that's why we have treaties that said we wouldn't let machines launch nukes. There have to be people in the middle, and there has to be a president and a key and all those things. And it's for this very reason. I mean, we can go back to about 1984. What was the movie where the machine War Games, right, was playing and thought the game was real, and so it was going to launch real nukes. Do not hook the machine to the nuclear arsenal. Other than that, we're fine, right? So ChatGPT is not going to 21, not going to blow up the world. It's a language model. No different than we've had a math model, right? Excel is a math model. Now we have a language model. Isn't that cool?
Right. Great explanation to that. So maybe a couple of questions I keeping in constraint of time.
Yeah.
One is with respect to the open source community and open source large language models which are coming, and then there are some these privacy or maybe ethical executive orders are coming into play by the governments. Some comments on that one, and then we'll have one.
Yeah. Sure. It totally makes sense that Europe and the U.S. have put forth rules, laws / executive orders that are talking about ethics and bias and all the things that are reasonable. but in fact, all of those rules, while verbose, are quite good. Here's the problem. The problem is, as you mentioned, open source, etc. there are people using open source models today, bad people, that are not following any of those rules. You can go on the dark web and you can get a large language model that is specifically designed to generate phishing attacks. And it's very, very, very good. And no government can do anything about it. So, of course, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple are going to follow rules. And they're incented to follow rules anyway. If there were no government rules, they would have set their own rules that are similar. Okay, they don't want to get sued. They're going to work through any copyright issues and all of the things that are going on. But these open source models, they're in the wild. They're not. Bad people and bad guys are going to do bad things with them. But they already do bad things with cars, planes, and Excel.
Right.
So every technology we have, bad people do bad things. And that'll be true. That is already true with large language models. I have a company that I helped start in the cybersecurity space called Token Ring. And we had foretold that AI would be able to start generating phishing attacks that are indistinguishable from real human emails, and that people would freely and willingly give up their MFA code to these attacks. Well, it turns out all of the major ransomware hacks over the last year included hacked MFA, social engineering MFA, or 2FA. So, or as well as technical hacks, right? This is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And the idea with Token Ring is there is no way to social engineer your code out of you because you can never see the code. It's a ring that you wear, and it only works on your finger because it's tied to your fingerprint. So you could lose the ring. It doesn't work for anyone else. It only works on your finger. Therefore, only you have access to your accounts and your networks, period, full stop. Whether you're IT sysadmin or just someone in their bank accounts or Facebook, whatever, right? So it turns out that's unhackable and unphishable. And that's where we need to go in terms of security, because that'll end the phishing attacks if there's nothing to share, and no matter what you click on, it'll come up and say, "Where's your token ring?" Well, then the hacker's dead, right? The hacker can't do anything with your information. They don't have a token ring, and they don't have your token ring. Even if they did, they need your arm or your finger with it, right? Which is unlikely to happen. So wherever there's technology like this, there's technology chasing it to put it to rest, as they say. Yeah.
True. Last question. As my audiences are primarily the technology folks, so, and there will be some developers or the different carriers. They're listening this podcast. So for them to learn and maybe any insight you can give them from going into their careers to learn AI or a Gen AI generally.
Sure.
And how do you see that they should focus on certain areas?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of my companies is AppVance.ai, which you know about, which has developed a quality assurance system, software quality assurance, to find bugs automatically with AI, with Gen AI. And that product was launched about 5 years ago, and it finds more bugs than human testers can for 100th the price, right? Something like that. If you're not using AppVance in software QA, I don't know what you're doing. You're doing it a very legacy way, right? Because there's kind of legacy testing and there's modern. So that company has led the field in generative AI for QA, and so we're very proud of that work. But look, I would look at wherever your labor costs are high, right? So you've got everything from customer support, tier 1, maybe eventually some tier 2. You've got, in carriers, you have a lot from, system routing to where am I going to run fiber, where am I going to put new cells, et cetera. AI can help with all of that. To, as I said, sort of in the software QA space, in the development space, you've got tons of developers. You'd like them to be twice as productive. They should all be using Copilot from GitHub. All of these are pretty obvious, right? All of these are pretty obvious. And so those are the places to look. Look around and say, I've got 300 people doing that task. Really? Why? Couldn't you make that 300 10 times more productive, even twice as productive, right? And we know you can't hire more people, not because there isn't budget, but because there's no people. It's very hard to hire, certainly in the US. So that's my recommendation. Look where you're spending a lot on labor and say, can I make those people more productive. Because that's a very high cost of my labor. And you're going to find 5 or 10 areas around your company that you can impact almost right away. And you can find me on my website, kevinsurace.com. It's just my name.com. And you can contact me there. There's a LinkedIn, and I'll answer my DMs. And I can certainly help you and say, look, this is what I would do, or this is the best practices from others.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining Open Tech Talks podcast. Really enjoyed your insights and having a decades of experience in AI and sharing the.
Thanks for listening to the OTech Talks podcast, and be part of Tech Talks at otechtalks.tv. It's a turf to share ideas, insights, and innovations.